And Major Garrett joins us now from the White House. So, Major, one of the strongest lines from yesterday's speech was the president saying he represents and he was elected by the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris. Well, Pittsburgh, along with a good amount of other cities, are saying that they will still follow the accord. So who is the president really representing in his decision to leave the climate deal?
Well, the biggest representation that he articulated yesterday was for the fossil fuel industries in this country and those employees that work for those fossil fuel industries. Oil, natural gas, chief among them, but also coal. So what the president said yesterday is those industries are still a relevant part of America's energy mix and energy future. That's a fundamental economic truth, but with his actions, not just yesterday, but an executive order he signed here in late March, rolling back all of President Obama's clean power regulations on coal-fired power plants, both new and old, the president has done everything he can to protect those fossil fuel industries and spend much less time either with government regulations or with government subsidies to boost renewable energy, jobs, and technology. So it is, in a classic sort of way, a 1970s, 1980s approach to American technology and American energy and American pollution control, not something involved in the 21st century green economy, which President Obama said many times was the future of energy jobs and energy technology. This president fundamentally doesn't believe that, and cities across the country that have adopted their own regulations or their own approaches to new construction of buildings are going to still err on the side of green technology and greener, more environmentally friendly construction. That's one thing cities can do outside of the Paris Climate Accord that the president has pulled the United States out of. So there's still this tension in America about what is the future and what is the energy mix and what's the federal government's regulatory role in all of that. The president has essentially tried to turn the clock back to the 70s and 80s, while many cities want to live not just in the present, but push forward on the green technology, green jobs agenda.
Major, speaking of the future, the president also seemingly left the door open for negotiations, saying they will see if they can make a deal that's fair. How big of a priority is this for the administration?
It's a theoretical priority, but the first question is, with whom do you negotiate? And other nations have said, look, there's a Paris Climate Accord. We're involved in it, and we're going to stay with it. Now, that's the current position. One of the fundamental truths of the Paris Climate Accord is that it does require U.S. taxpayers to participate and fund a global climate, essentially bank account. That is U.S. taxpayer dollars, $1 billion already, a projected $23 billion over the life of the Paris Climate Accord, to finance pollution reduction measures taken out not in America, but other countries. That was one of the president's biggest complaints with the Paris Climate Accord, that not only did it oppose a lot of regulations here, but it required U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund pollution control efforts elsewhere. He said that's unfair. It disadvantages American jobs and taxpayers. So if the United States makes good on this President Trump promise, and there's no indication the country won't, and pulls out and takes that money off the table, other countries may have to come back to the United States and say, all right, without that money, we can't get as much of this work done, so what do you want, United States of America? And on that basis, there might be an opening for renegotiation, but we're not there yet.
Major, I thought it was fascinating to see the new president of France, Emmanuel Macron, deliver a speech in English. Very, very rare for a French president, any foreign president, to deliver a speech from that country in English. I don't even think Charles de Gaulle did it after the Allies liberated France, although I could be wrong about that. But climate change aside, what does that decision signal to allies about the U.S.? And frankly, does the president and his advisors and his supporters care what global reaction is?
I think they care in a certain sense, in that they care how much Europe gets the message that American sovereignty is preeminent in all of these decisions. Last week when we were at the G7 meetings in Sicily, the White House fought very hard for new language in the G7 communique on immigration and refugees. And that language said, national sovereignty comes first, and national interest should drive all immigration and refugee policy choices. That's what this country is doing under President Trump. And when the G7 used language about sovereignty and national interests in the question of refugees and immigration. It was this administration's way of driving that message home on a lot of fronts. And that's exactly what the president's talking about when it comes to pollution control, greenhouse gas emissions, and green technology. The United States is going to chart its own course. And so the president cares about European reaction to that only in the sense that Europe understands that America is no longer talking about a collaborative consensus process on some of these global issues. Under President Trump, America is going to do what's in its best interests and leave everyone to their own devices. That's a message the president wants Europe and the rest of the world to get, and how Europe and the rest of the world react to it is not something that the White House is that sensitive to. It just wants to make sure Europe understands this economic nationalism is not rhetorical, it is real.
All right, Major Garrett for us from the White House. Thank you.